high across attributes, you have a low. And this means that the data are not very dependable. This is also very important for the practitioner lives as well. There are all sorts of studies. In order to identify whether a study has been done correctly, sometimes you need to clean data. You know, it's highly unlikely, especially when it comes to image and equity studies, quantitative studies, that you will not have to conduct secondary meta-analysis on your primary data in order to clean your data from such phenomena, such as halo effect. But this, I'm stressing this because it's very important when you look at background image studies for as consumer insights for your assignment, to be capable of understanding whether these are dependable data you can use for your brand audit or not. And finally, moving on to the laddering technique. And the laddering technique is a way of peeling the onion, the choice onion, in terms of reaching from the basic product valuation level to a deeply latent consumer axiology. It's used for tapping into the different reasons why a person attributes equity to a brand. It depends on the so-called mean-sense theory, which stresses that there is a hierarchical organization of consumer perceptions and product knowledge that range from attributes, conception consequences to personal values. And this is research in terms of a causal nexus or the causal chain, where you start asking consumers why they prefer this brand or why do they use this product category, in which case they tend to come up with more prosaic or, let's say, threshold reasons for using a category. Why do you eat ice cream? Because I like its sweetness. Why do you eat low-calorie ice cream? Because I want to maintain my shape. And this is where the note for stepping over to the next phase. Why is your shape is very important for you? Because it's very important for my self-image when it comes to others. And this way you start to understand the multiple layers. What do we call brand benefits actually function? And this might stretch onto much deeper territories. For example, values that stem from belief systems, from other agencies of socialization, such as a peer group. And this is how you understand how, the values that are carried, the value system of each consumer, implicitly and subconsciously influences a market's product choice. This is very important for equity because this is the very meaning of resonance. What does resonate means? To echo, to resound. So the more a brand's projected values resonate with or resound what already exists in the consumer subconscious as a value system, the greater the fit. This is called brand image, self-image congruence. The more congruent the brand image with your self-image as a person. So the higher likelihood you will continue using and buying this brand because it's more valuable to you. This one, brand differentiation becomes personalized. The latter technique is very apt for researching exactly these different layers whereby the personal axiology informs the evaluation of attributes and drawing causal links between them. I uploaded on my lab one of the research papers that I published in 2020 in Psychology and Marketing, where I apply this technique in a social media context, in the context of user-generated advertising, in case you might want to look at it. Right, questions so far? No? Okay then. Let's move on to the final part for today, that is research methods and techniques for branding and brand equity. as I said very persistently last week, quoting Peter Drucker, you cannot manage what you can measure. So unless you have adequate methods for measuring across time the brands, how they work, and their effectiveness, and different facets of brand building, you cannot manage them. So brand management is all about rendering manageable, intangible brand association. What kind of techniques? In this context, there are both quantitative and qualitative research methods and techniques. Starting with quantitative techniques. Now, the cornerstone of brand management in terms of quantitative techniques is the tracking survey. Tracking surveys collect information from consumers on a routine basis over time, usually through quantitative measures of brand performance on a number of key dimensions. These are usually the dimensions of brand awareness, brand familiarity, brand usage, brand image, and the main message recall. For example, for McDonald's, in one of the tracking surveys, they used these measures of unaided brand awareness. What brands of fast food restaurant chains are you aware of? Which brands of fast food restaurant chains would you consider visiting? Which are your favorite fast food restaurant chains? In terms of brand image, they have used various attributes ranging from convenience. It's convenient to eat at, provides quick client service. Aspects such as cleanliness, it has clean facilities, whether it's for the whole family or just for individual consumption. The quality of the food and the taste, has delicious food, healthy food, varied menu, good prices. Brand personality, user imagery, how well the following traits describe McDonald's on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 corresponds to not at all and 5 very much. It's a sincere, exciting, competent, sophisticated, round, principled, and passionate brand. Apart from tracking service, there are also a whole brand image studies. That is, studies that are not conducted necessarily either on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis, but maybe conducted once per year or once every 2 years. Highly recommended to conduct a brand image study at least once per year, because this is the average time span it takes for either your brand or a competitor's brand perceptions and associations change. So if you conduct less often, then you cannot really use this strategic information for any tactical planning purposes, whether this is the development of the advertising execution or shifting or distribution. It's of paramount importance for identifying territories for differential positioning, for identifying points of parity and differentiation in a summary brand set, and of course for identifying threats and opportunities in image terms. In your essay, you'll conduct a SWOT analysis. Or analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. In this context, acquiring background information about your brand image and competitors is of paramount importance, because you will have to answer all the three. That is, identify territories for differential positioning, identify points of parity and differentiation in excellency, and identify threats and opportunities in image terms. You will have to identify all these three aspects, which are part and parcel of your brand knowledge. This is a nice portrayal of key questions that are answered by different image research techniques. It's let's say a nice guide to selecting different methods, because there's so many methods call it the content are there, unless you have some very firm grasp of which methods suit which marketing task, then you will either make their own choice of method, so you will not procure the essential data, or you might make an erroneous use of the correct method or suboptimal use, thus not generating the full-fledged breadth of insights as you might have generated if you had followed such a systematic method selection procedure beforehand. Measuring brand image through direct questioning is one of the most, let's say, customarily applied ways of gauging brand image and how different brands score against image attributes. In this continuous table, that is the output of tracking survey in the alcoholic drink sector. You can see what kind of scores have been attained for different brands and categories against different brand image attributes, such as it's a sensuous brand. For example, Jack Daniels scored 53% as against viewers who scored 41%. These are fictive data. These are not real data, so don't take this data at face value. Now, one of the key methods that are used in both brand image and brand equity studies, and of course these two kinds of outputs tend to be interlinked in quantitative surveys, as brand image, as we saw, brand knowledge structure is the essential component of brand equity. Structural equation modeling. Up until the point in the 90s, it used to be multiple regression, but another techniques like factorial analysis, for example, and class analysis. With the advent of structural equation modeling, nowadays almost half of published research includes structural equation modeling. And I'm saying this not because you're expected to conduct such a study for your thesis, for your assignment, but given that there is quite an extensive academic literature that has made use of this technique, it is very important that we understand its basic task, the basic metrics, and what these metrics mean for understanding how brands work. So SEM is a method for measuring the hypothesized causal interactions among the variables of a structural model. This is a structural model, and the arrows point to causal interaction. So we have, for example, construct A, construct B, and construct B is likely to have a causal effect of construct A. It splits constructs between two major classes, antecedents and outcomes. That is, what comes before and what comes after in a causal chain. Antecedents are causal drivers for building brand image and equity, that is, performance and quality. And the outcomes are results of brands with high equity, that is, high purchase intent. So in terms of brand image, the antecedents may be brand image attributes, and the outcome is to what extent this impact purchase intent or the intention to recommend, as we saw earlier. It's a method for demonstrating causal relations among unobservable or latent variables based on observed variables. A latent variable is an abstract construct. For example, brand personality. The way to assess and to access this abstract concept is through more concrete representations, which are called observed variables. So you want to understand the brand personality is a latent variable or hypervariable. You have to ask consumers about concrete issues in concrete questions like the brand for, whether this is a brand for young people or an outgoing brand, and so on and so forth. And the sum of this course makes up the dimension. It's just like the brand master evaluator model we saw earlier, which consists of different four dimensions. Each of these dimensions includes different attributes. It's a constant process of reducing image aspects from more concrete to more general, to more abstract. It is used for both exploratory and confirmatory purposes. Exploratory research. How many of you have taken market research module in the past? The same goes for you people who are online right now. Which of you have taken market research classes?
Most of us.
In the past?
Research methods.
Research methods, yes.
In the previous semester.
Okay.
We had also this one for the proposal for the dissertation.
Right. Are you looking into quantitative techniques?
Yes.
Of course. Are they teaching you SPSS?
No, not yet.
Will they be teaching you SPSS?
Maybe they're gonna have a seminar for that.
So you're not supposed to be using SPSS?
Only if we're gonna choose the quantitative method.
Right, okay. Did they mention structural equation modeling at all?
They mention a lot of theory regarding the research.
Okay. How about our online friends? How many of you, which of you have undertaken marketing research module? Response? Mr. Papadoniou? Are you there? Mr. Rodopoulos?
Yes.
Have you undertaken? Have you been taught research marketing methods?
I can't hear you very well. It's not very clear.
Have you been taught marketing research methods in the past?
If I have taken the course?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
It's my first semester. Maybe it's the next one.
All right. Okay. Ms. Karamouzi, Mr. Rogoli?
Yes.
I have as well. Sorry, I wasn't here before.
The people who are full time, they will have done research.
Okay. Right. So it's good to hear. So some of these concepts should not be, like for example, validity and reliability, which are standard criteria for quantitative research, should not be alien to most of you. There are two key sets of measurements in structural equation modeling. The first one measures the model's validity and reliability, and the second one measures the model's overall goodness of fit. This is a typical portrayal of a structural equation model. It's a way of identifying the potential relational paths between the constants of the model. In this case, we have only one-way paths. So this is a recursive model. If these links were two-way links, that would be a non-recursive model in the language of SEM. So in this model, you can see that there are three different columns, let's say, of constructs. On the left-hand side column, you have the antecedents in the model of reliability, effectiveness, and awareness, behavioral loyalty, and attitude. Each of these antecedents, the first two make up the overarching dimension or the latent variable, as we said, functional antecedents, and the second cluster of attributes makes up the experiential antecedents. In this case, the outcomes are the consequences, such as anticipated risk of purchase or the anticipated confidence in the purchase decision. Between these two, there is a set of moderating factors. That is later variables that may moderate the relationship between the attestants and the outcomes. This is quite often encountered in structural equation modeling, as well as quantitative research in general. That is between a set of attestants and a set of outcomes, you have a set of moderating factors. For example, advertising effectiveness, these moderating factors may concern the level of involvement with advertising in general, or the level of involvement with a particular product category. The harder, because this moderating factor is likely precisely to moderate the extent to which we will positively evaluate the outcome that stems from a set of specific cues, and to prove the effect of the moderating factors vis-a-vis the causal power of the cues themselves. For example, if you have an actor in a specific actor or an endorser for Vodafone in a new television commercial or YouTube commercial or whatever, and you want to examine its potential effectiveness, then you would not just look for the kind of outcome variables like likability or intention to recommend person watching the TV, but you would examine this in the context of moderating factors such as involvement in the attitude towards the mobile service category. It might be a rejection of mobile phones, so it doesn't make any sense in the first place whether the brand is using an endorser to enhance its appeal as an outcome variable. This is why it's very important in marketing research to include this the effect of these moderating factors. The first case, the first set of output that is relating to the model's validity and reliability concern the validity of the construct, and the validity of the construct is divided into four types of validity, that is convergent, discriminant, nomological, and phase validity. In the case of ICM, convergent validity concerns the extent to which indicators of a specific construct converge or share a high proportion of variance in common, and this is measured through three key metrics. The first one is the parameter weights, that is the factor loadings of observable variables on latent constructs. On the first column, you can see the output of these factor loadings that is called parameter estimates, and this should be 0.5 or higher. So whenever you read this kind of output, these scores that are factor loadings of each individual attribute and its data variable should be at least 0.5. The next metric is average variance extracted, so-called AVE, which should also be at least 0.5. As you can see on the third column, for each latent variable, all of the scores, with the exception of resonance, are either higher or very close to 0.5. And finally, Cronbach's alpha, construct reliability, that measures how internally consistent are the constructs of the model. On the second column, the output score should be at least 0.7. Discriminability, as I was talking about, considers the extent to which a construct is truly distinct from other constructs. And this is where AVE comes into play. The AVE estimate should be greater than the square of the correlation between the factor and other factors to provide evidence of discriminability. Phase validity concerns the extent to which the content of the items is consistent with the construct definition, and this is based on researchers' judgments. That is, the individual items that make up its later variable, like it's prepared the same, has the same smell, the same temperature. All that should relate to reliability, and this is, let's say, an intuitive sense way of sense making prior to applying numerical validation. And finally, the nomological validity is tested by examining whether or not the correlations between the contacts in the measurement theory make sense, and this is where we apply the so-called covariance matrix 5. Now, it may sound a bit complicated, but it's not. I have broken these metrics and steps in a very edible manner for you. Here is a step-by-step process of reading and understanding how structural question model applies to brand image and equity research. Again, in case in your background literature you wish to employ academic papers where SEM has been applied, of course, you can always cite the main findings towards the end of an academic paper, but unless you understand the very method whereby this data has been produced and whether you agree, because there are some points in the analytical process which you might find there is an error. For example, in some surveys that have applied regression, scores as low as 0.1, that is 10%, quite often are cited as being indicative of a strong positive correlation, which I find, personally quite extravagant as a claim. Anyways, the second aspect of SEM is gauging the goodness of fit of the model itself, that is, how all the hypothesized constructs, if the hypothesized constructs, the pathways among these constructs, in fact, reflect reality as regards the causal relationship. There are two main metrics here. The first one is called the CFI, and it measures how accurately the hypothesized model fits the sample data overall. Score must be above 0.9. And RMSA reflects how the model will fit the population covariance matrix if it were available with unknown but optimally chosen parameter values. And the score for RMCA should be at least at most minus 0.1. Now, the three types of meaning in SEM. Okay, what you should take out of it is that this is a very useful explanation of all the different concepts that may impact both the interaction of what's called endogenous variables as well as exogenous variables. That is, variables that may impact your representation of reality within the model from outside the model itself. Okay, this is a bit of more detail, but it's good to know if you're going to use SEM. The next technique, content technique, which is very, very important, again, very extensively used, especially for product testing and new product development purposes, and of course, as a proxy indicator of brand strength, conjoint analysis. It is very useful for measuring brand strength indirectly by gauging at what price point consumers will switch to cheaper alternatives. The traditional method works like this. Respondents are presented with different combinations of brands, attributes, and price points. As is this case on the right hand side for different configurations of personal computers. That is a compact, an IBM, and a Dell with different capacity, with different processing power, and at different price points, each one of them. And consumers are requested to state their preference for its combination. Each combination then is attributed a part worth, what's called, or utility score from 0 to 1. This part worth is reflective of the share of preference. It's not the same as market share, but it has the same function within the model the exercise, that is the share of preference it's not the same in terms of distribution or the absolute score, but it performs the same function as a market share within an estimate or a calculation of the value of a brand within the entire market value. And by summing up these part words, you can gauge the relative strength of a brand by taking into account both attributes and its price point. Now, although this is a very extensively applied technique and very useful as well, what kind of attributes are left out of the picture, as you can see from this particular example? Same question goes to you, fellow internet observers. Okay, what is used out of the picture is intangible elements. And what kind of contribution, what's the contribution of tangible elements? The biggest one. So yes, it is very useful, but of course you cannot include attributes like this is an adventure brand. When comparing among different brands, it doesn't translate very easily into this purely functional oriented modeling technique. Anyways, it's a first step of gauging your relative strength in purely functional terms in relationship to the price that you command. And of course, as we saw in our opening slides, the more functional oriented the category, in which case we're talking about PCs, the more representative the output of a conjoint technique is likely to be of real brand preference. It allows for designing new products to maximize buyer interest at a low manufacturing cost. It calculates part worth, that is the relative weight of each attribute in the choice structure. And this is very important because you can use these part worths or relative weights that are assigned to different attributes for underwriting scenarios. So, for example, you can use different scores for the attributes that are already researched by brand, and by playing around with different scores, examine the impact of the preference share for each brand within your portfolio in the entire market. So it's a very useful exercise, not just for obtaining a descriptive output, a descriptive portrayal of the relative preference in the market, but also for making projections in the context of new product development and what would be the impact on price. Okay, I will leave you at this with conjoint analysis for the time being, as we have reached the end of today's session. There are quite a few more techniques that we'll be looking hopefully during the following session, during the next session. Any questions so far? Okay, next week is very important because I will be discussing about your assignment, what are the expectations and what kind of steps you have to follow in order to conclude effectively with your assignment. I will be doing this towards the end of the session in order to avoid spending the most of the evening in explaining the assignment for obvious reasons. However, as I'm sure you are aware, you're always welcome to visit me during my office hours every Monday between 5 to 6, either solo or in groups, to request further clarifications. Or again, if you want to drop an email saying that you're having problems understanding this or that, and you might want some extra explanations. So this effectively concludes today's session. Thank you for attending today. How about our friends online? Any questions from your side?
No, thank you.
No,
No,
okay.
no, thank you.
Have a nice evening, and I'll see you all next Monday.
You too.
You
Bye.
too.